If you're not already using AI regularly, some of these might be game-changing strategies that can streamline your operations. If your competitors are starting to use AI already, then hopefully this will give you some ways to avoid falling behind.
Welcome to Less You, More Profit, the podcast for small business owners who want to work less, stay focused on what matters, and build a business that actually supports their life. If you're running a small business and feel like you're doing everything all the time and still wondering why it never feels like enough, you're not alone. I'm Shanna. For a long time, I believed that if I could do something myself, I probably should. But what I've learned and what I share here is that just because you can do it doesn't mean it's what you're called to keep doing. Around here, we talk about simplifying what's complicated, reducing friction in your day-to-day work, and creating systems that give you real margin in your time, your energy, and your focus. Nothing fancy, nothing overwhelming, just practical ways to stop carrying more than you were ever meant to carry alone. And yes, I approach all of this with faith in mind, not in a heavy way, just the belief that we're meant to be good stewards of our time, our gifts, and our energy, and that burnout is not the goal.
Question for you. Is AI really something you have to have as a small business owner? Today, I'm going to talk about some stuff I think are actionable tips to integrating AI into your workflow to ensure your small business remains competitive. As a small business owner, you probably feel the pressure of this rapidly evolving digital landscape. Your current systems may not be enough to keep pace. Every day, there's a new headline about artificial intelligence transforming everything, leaving a lot of you to worry if you're already falling behind. So that fear of obsolescence or missing out on a competitive edge, I know can be overwhelming. And especially when you're already juggling a dozen or maybe 3 dozen other priorities. But if you're like me, like there's a record that's been playing in the back of my brain. Do I really need to start using AI to stay relevant? Or is all this just hype, right? And they're really just trying to increase their valuation. I am usually the first person at work testing out anything to do with automation. As you've probably heard me say a million times, I consider myself a process person. I love trying to make things more efficient. I always build a system. So it probably should come as no surprise that when I started digging into AI, I kind of got obsessed. And I'm never short of any crazy ideas, right? I have several businesses I would love to start, but obviously bandwidth, there's no way I can do 15 businesses at the same time. So I get really excited. I stay up, get up in the middle of the night, write down a whole bunch of ideas. Sometimes they go a little bit beyond that, but usually I come back to reality and the bills actually have to be paid. So I have to turn it off. So, but over the holidays, my little brother, who is super smart at this stuff, and he's been building automations and writing code to do things for his own business for 30 years. Gosh, am I really that old? Anyway, they so he and I had a conversation over Christmas, and he asked me a hard question, which was how are you not using this yet? So I started with a chat GPT and just started diving in, and I went kind of nuts. My personal opinion from that dive is that it can absolutely become a distraction, but I also felt like it was a huge creativity unlocker. All these things that I knew could never be quite possible without a whole lot more time or a whole lot more people now opened up, right? And I realized that I could actually reach some of these goals because I could now create the automations and do a lot of the background work that would have taken hands on keyboard from me before. I could automate it. using AI. So now I have to decide which direction to take it. And to be honest, I want to take it in every direction because that's who I am, right? If I had one word to describe myself, it would be multi-passionate. And you probably heard me say that before. And honestly, like, I'm just not willing to settle. I want to do it all. And I recognize that if you can solely focus on one thing, that you'll probably do better at that one thing. But maybe I have a little ADHD, but my brain just doesn't work that way. I can't. So you're gonna see if you follow me. There's a lot of stuff going on that's coming out of my brain and probably gonna be put into reality soon. So because of how much it unlocked for me, I wanted to pivot the podcast a little bit and start to share some of that with you guys because I think that a lot of small business owners are so buried in their day-to-day work that they don't know what it can do for them. And so there's no perhaps you aren't confident that you will have a return for the investment of your time learning how to do it. And I think that is not true. And I think, I mean, in some cases, maybe, but for the most part, I do think that there's a lot that it can help you with. So I'll go through a couple of things that I think are important to start with, right? So first, you need to know what it can actually do. So if you want to master AI integration in your business, you first have to figure out what's the gap between the technical potential and the practical application. So I would start by auditing your current workflows and just look for repetitive, data heavy, time consuming tasks, right? Don't look for a magic button to just look for where you have something that you do it multiple times a day and it takes just a little more time than you think it should, right? And just like in the garden or anything else that you're doing, it's one tiny little incremental step at a time. And with automation before, it was the same, but it took a lot more effort to get those small gains with automation because the tools like Power Automate and some of the things that you had available did take a little bit of expertise and they were quirky. But with AI, you can do this with natural language. Okay, so here's a few examples of how you can apply AI to work. You can use AI to draft initial marketing or social media posts. You've probably seen this. I mean, this is probably the easiest use case. Just think how if you are making your own flyers for things or your own ads, that the static ads, just pictures, these, think how long you have spent just moving little pieces around on Canva. If you use AI, it at least starts it for you, right? Maybe you still do the finishing touches, but this is something that you can definitely save a lot of time. I will caution that, especially ChatGPT, but the other ones too, if you don't start by giving it a theme that is yours, and specifically the fonts and that's the certain styling, they're all everyone's going to know you made it with AI because they all start to look exactly the same. And so now I'm walking around and seeing flyers on businesses or in places I go a lot, like the local pool, right? And you can it's very obvious that they made it with the ChatGPT because they all look exactly the same. So I would invest a little bit of time to configure it. This chair does not want to cooperate with me. That I would give it a little bit of time. Of course, you can use it for data analysis, right? And it can search the whole internet. So, but you can also turn it on your own stuff. And that's something that's really helpful. Is just you don't have to take the time anymore to build the actual formulas. You can just turn it on your data and say, hey, what pattern do you see here? And then admin tasks. Okay, so the one that is 100%, if you're doing a lot of meetings and your clients are okay with it, I would absolutely start recording all your meetings. And you don't necessarily have to record the video. You could let them turn the video off. You to get the transcripts and the notes and the suggested after action items, and then even automating some follow up with that because it'll email it to you. And of course, they can have the copy of that too, but it is huge time saver if you're jumping from meeting to meeting to meeting, because how many times, and we did a meeting episode, right? All those things that you want to do to prep for a meeting, and a lot of times you prep for it well, but then the follow-up is where we fall short. And so I think recording meetings and using transcription is one of the most valuable tools if you have a business where you're doing a lot of meetings with people. Something else, just a quick tip on that, is in any of these, when you ask it to do research, specify how you want it to come back to you. Do you want it in a PDF? Do you want it in a document? Would you like it in a table format that you can cut and paste, copy paste somewhere else? Of course, you can integrate these tools with everything else, but to start, when you're just chatting with it on your phone, asking it for some of these questions, that's just a beginner step, is make sure you give it the format you want it to come out in. So just some things to think about as you're evaluating what to bring on. So obviously you should have in mind some kind of an expectation of a cost benefit analysis, right? You need to know how much it costs up front. You need to perhaps limit the amount of time that your people can spend learning it and trying new things. There's definitely a lot of research out right now for bigger companies, especially, where they are not getting the return. And I think a lot of that is because it does kind of take you in a million directions. And so it's hard to be focused and just finish a project, right? You get real excited, you can do it. And then as soon as you hit the glitch, you don't actually have the technical know-how to see why it's broken, right? And so you can end up in a loop. And I actually did this with, like, the one of the very first things that I started building was a grading app for my homeschool, because I'm not the best at documenting grades. I use ChatGPT for this. And just the regular chat, because at the time they didn't even have some of the coding tools out, which is crazy because that was only a few months ago. But the it it started taking me in loops for making fixes. And so I got everything published to the website to test it. And then it just had a couple little glitches, and I kept telling it, I want you to fix this. And it had told me, I'm going to go into too much detail, but basically it was giving me, it kept inserting an error that it had already told me about in another area section of the code. And because I have some familiarity with code, I would not call myself an expert coder by any means, but I at least recognize the different commands. And so I looked through the code and saw that it had inserted a section that was the opposite pattern of what it had told me to do earlier when we fixed the different section. So I asked it, don't I need this? And oh yes, absolutely, you're right, you do. I missed that, right? And so I'm like, well, how did you miss that? I mean, like, you wrote all this. And so I think that the memory is a little bit, I feel like it's not 100% reliable within a chat stream, right? And I think that's because it's trying to be efficient and not have to remember everything. So it looks back at pieces, and sometimes it misses something that you're like, because I'm using my real memory, I remember that it said that. And also, like, it called variables that it hadn't even set yet and in the code. So that my first experience with coding with it was actually pretty bad. Not that I could have coded that myself at all, but definitely not faster. But it kind of gave me that hope that I could do it so easily with this. And then it dragged me down a rabbit hole of trying to fix it. they've come a long way. And since then, I switched to Claude about 2 months ago, and I don't use it basically anything else much at all, except for inside of tools. Like inside of Google, I do use Gemini, but ChatGPT, honestly, it's the cheap subscription for me. And so if I have a question that's random and I don't need it to be tracked in within the context of any project, I just throw away, that I go there. So I don't use my tokens for my bigger work. So that cost benefit you really need to be thinking about. So because I think the same thing is happening in these big companies where they're just not finishing anything they start. So they get excited and it'll flatter the heck out of you. You know, it'll tell you you can do anything. And then as you dive down into it, it turns out it's a little bit more complicated than it's making it sound. So obviously security and stability are important. I would say initially just stick with the the primary tools, right? Claude, Gemini, Copilot in Microsoft, and ChatGPT. I start there, and all the other smaller subscriptions, the AI tools, I would just be very cautious because those third-party tools are popping up super fast, and you know they they may not all have a very strong architecture behind them. One last little piece that I will mention here that I think is really important when you're using this stuff is, and I know that there's probably been some articles about this too, and everyone's saying people can't think anymore because they're using AI and it's doing all the thinking for them. And maybe there's some truth to that. But I would say you do need to find a sweet spot where like your human creativity is still driving. And I think and I know I've talked about this before a little bit, but pen on paper without any distractions is actually a super great way to do this. And this, I always start with a brain dump on paper, right? And tools have done this long before AI, right? And if you've ever found yourself working in a Canva project or working in a PowerPoint and you get distracted by the formatting and the spacing, and when you start to lose focus on the content. And I've told my kids this from the beginning of homeschooling, that I I actually don't allow them to create on the computer. You have to create on paper first. It doesn't have to be the whole thing, right? It can just be an outline, but you need to create on paper first. And that is a less about the creativity coming from something else, because obviously up until, outside of AI, and that's not giving you ideas, but it is, unless I guess if you're just searching on the internet for something. But I think you just come at it with a much clearer picture of what you want if you sit down and do it on paper first. And because you are not distracted, you can actually focus. And I think it's something that we all struggle with, me too. So I would say still start on paper, right? The other thing is the AI will confuse you. And so it will start to take you down a different path. It will start to get you super excited and make something bigger than it needs to be. You're going to have to put it in check. And so if you have something to go back to remind you, what is it we were really trying to accomplish, and not, and maybe even writing down for yourself, like, here's the scope, and starting with that. Like, this is the scope of this project. I don't want to go outside those boundaries. I just want to make sure that I actually finish the task that I started. And so I've actually started to put that in some of the overall instructions for my Claude, is don't drag me down rabbit holes. Keep me on track and make sure to push me to go to market as soon as possible, rather than, you know, continue to build to perfection something that never sees the light of day. I would also caveat that you want to remember that a lot of things that people are saying AI can do for them, you could already do with automation. And it's not actually You don't necessarily need any AI to do it. For example, scheduling. So I multiple times when I'm looking up searches for how AI can, like simple things AI can do to help a business owner, automated booking comes up every time. This is not something that AI needs to help you with. There are 100 ways to do this already. If you have a Microsoft account, you have a booking calendar. If you have a Google account, you have a booking calendar. And then of course, Calendly's been out there for years. There are tons of other ones. Now, does it move things around in your schedule? Does it pick, it doesn't follow, it doesn't think about it. It just sends a link and they figure out when you have time open on your schedule. Where it could help you is something like researching the person who booked that. Here's some homework to try this week if you want, since I always like to give you something to try. See if you if you have Google or Microsoft, which I can't imagine you don't have one, just look for the little icon it's usually in the top right corner that is for Google. It's a little like a diamond that tells you that you have Gemini. You can turn that on inside of an application. So you could open a Word document, open an Excel file, and then, sorry, those would not be in Google. Those would be in Microsoft, but a doc or a sheet in Google. Or look for in Copilot, it's a little more colorful icon. And look for that and just ask it to summarize the document, right? And just see what it does. And then if you are really curious, I would say, and you can use Google or like Gemini or Copilot. You do not have to have a Claude or a OpenAI ChatGPT account to use this. I know Google and Microsoft, it seems like it's only inside the tools, but it actually isn't. Like gemini.google.com. So you can go to that and you can just you can use it like a generic chat tool like you would use ChatGPT or Claude, and it's pretty good. And then you're not paying for an extra subscription because you're probably already paying for it to be on in your a normal workspace account. So try that, and then try it inside your tools. Try it for to see if you can do something a little bit more quickly, even just prepping an agenda for a meeting. But I would encourage you also, like if there's one of those ideas that's been niggling in the back of your head for years that you didn't think you had the bandwidth to try, just talk about it with the AI. And it's going to encourage you, maybe over encourage you. So, be cautious, but just start talking through it and let it kind of pull that creativity back out of you. And even if all you do is think about it and you don't execute one thing, right? It's just fun to start to realize that maybe you did have a good idea and, play with a bunch of them and maybe that passion project that you have been putting off is actually something you can do. And especially with your business, right? If maybe it's an expansion, maybe it's a new product line, maybe it's a new way of engaging your customers, but I think it will make you happier to be creative, even if you don't execute it.
Automate or hand off. Go do it. That's the win. Before you go, stay in the loop. I've got Gathered, my life tracking app, and Praised, our streamlining course launching soon. Follow us wherever you are on social. Links are in the show notes. Now go simplify something, and see you next time.
Oh my gosh, this thing's driving me crazy. You can just go to gemini.com or gemini.ai, I think maybe. And hold on, I'm gonna find that link because I don't want to lie to you.